Our second presentation this morning, you will hear from Noel Gavigan, who will present on biomass in Ireland, decarbonising industrial, commercial and domestic heating. So while Alina focused on the European aspects, Noel will focus on the Irish specific situation. Noel is the technical executive of the Irish Bioenergy Association since 2010, and his main role is in delivery of technical backup for members and also the management of the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme. Noel has played a central role in many projects which the Irish Bioenergy Association has rolled out over the years: Biomass Trade Centres, Biogas 3, Digestate Standards, Midlands Bioenergy Development Project and the Small Scale Biogas Demonstration Project. So we now hand over to Noel, who will take you through his presentation, and we take questions for Noel again and Alina at the end of Noel's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sean. So what I'm going to do is a brief overview of the industry in Ireland, where things are at, what the potential is there, and just a bit of setting the scene for today. In this, I'll keep it as brief. First of all, this is our 25th National Bioenergy Conference. We've been running this since the start of the century, and what we've done one thing differently this year, we're now splitting into two. What we found over the years, as an organisation, we cover lots of different sectors. The biomethane wood and wood fuels are probably the two biggest sectors. So we've split out the wood fuel altogether because it's that largest sector and there's a lot of activity going on there, and we find it's time to do that because there's very little cross interest between some of the sectors. So the second one, for anyone that's interested, it will be held here in October, and that'll be for biomethane and biofuel. So again, there'll be details on that on the website. So first of all, as an organisation, I'll just run through that quite quickly, but look, ultimately, we're a members' organisation. We were set up in 1999 to promote the use of bioenergy across Ireland, and through that, we to run events like this for networking. We are very much involved in lobbying, both at an Irish level and an EU level, to try and get the right policies in place. We have been working quite a lot on R&D projects over the years. We have just taken on a number of new, Stephen will talk later on about some of the R&D projects we're doing on biochar, but over the years, we have really benefited from R&D projects in the solid biomass space and also in biomethane. So that's something that has helped us a lot. And again, a lot of member support, a lot of information goes through our network, and we quite often ask assistance on certain matters. So again, our organisation has grown. It's great to see the two new staff then as well this year started. So it's a huge plus to us ourselves. We have a large catalogue of webinars on our website if any want to go through that on various topics. There's 50 of them or 49 of them there at the moment. So if any want to look at various topics, we probably have a webinar on it. We've covered an exhaustive list of things there. So feel free to have a look on the website for that. The other thing is we've started a series of fact sheets. We've 8 of them at the moment, and again, we've some of them on the stands here today if you want to take a look at them. But we found they're 2-pager info sheets just to introduce people. Those of us that are in the sector know what it's about, but it's quite often very useful to have a fact sheet on various topics. So we've the common ones for this would be the one on wood and solid biomass fuels, and also the wood fuel fact sheet. To a certain extent, the energy crops as well. And this SSRH fact sheet we find very useful for people to understand the grant aid available. And we have a number of sector publications and reports that we've used, I suppose, to inform policy over the years and to examine where the sector is at and what it can achieve. Some of those I'll branch into a little bit shortly. I suppose the principal thing is where does bioenergy sit? And if you look at this from the macro level, the IPCC, which is the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, are very solid on the value of bioenergy in meeting our ultimate climate targets. If we were to go to zero carbon, we have to have a strong proportion of bioenergy in there. It is also already the largest source of renewable energy out there in the world today, but it has always got a big place. There are a number of challenges, obviously, in feedstock and other things that we need to sort out and to make sure we maintain everything is working correctly, but ultimately it is a large player, and in particular, as we heard from the last slides, in the heat sector. I'm not going to go too much into the stats on this. Irina went into it very well in the last slides and probably has more up-to-date figures. But ultimately, again, to go back into that, the largest source of renewable energy in the world at approximately 60% is coming from biomass and renewable wastes. So it is a big, the elephant in the room when it comes to all renewables out there. I suppose the critical thing across Europe, and again, Irina would have updated figures on this, is in terms of heat. The vast majority, 80% of all renewable heat across Europe is coming from solid biomass, to a certain extent from biomethane as well, but really the solid biomass is the big proportion of that. It's the heavy lifter. Irina was very kind in not pointing out exactly how bad Ireland was. I will point it out. Out of the EU 27, we are number 27. We are the lowest in terms of penetration of renewable heat across our European partners. So you can look at it in a point of view, we have a whole lot of room for improvement. There's a massive market out there for us to tackle, and it's also critical to look at those that are highest in renewable energy penetration for the heat markets. They're all very solidly based on wood fuels. And that's worth noting. So again, we have a huge amount of potential there to grow the sector. Across European, we've seen a lot of growth over the last decade, a couple of decades. This is just some examples of the figures that we've seen coming from, we've got some good information there from Hargastner and Bioenergy Europe in terms of the amount of facilities going in. But France, Austria, they have strong support schemes in place. So in France, they have had a support scheme which is up to €5,000 for a domestic house for a biomass system. They brought it down to 1,500 this year. It's been quite a successful scheme. They're having to pull back a little bit on it. And they also offer various different grants through the Prime Renew process. In Italy, they have supplied upwards of 75% funding over the years, in Austria, and that has hugely benefited in terms of wood pellets, log burners and wood chip boilers. Then the Italian market, they have supported since 2016 over the last 10 years almost €500 million and put in about 500,000 biomass systems of various scales. So there is a lot of support here. We have the SSRH here, which is, we're not seeing these sort of numbers. We're trying to understand why. It's not SCI's fault. It's not, we've trying to figure out why things are going wrong there and why we're not getting the same level of penetration. But there is definitely a massive market there in Ireland. There's a lot of facilities that, and especially now as we're looking at energy security, that having an indigenous source of energy, it's being renewable, it ticks all the boxes. In most cases, it's very cost effective and will offer cost savings. And so we are looking at this and saying this is something we really need to embrace at a much higher level. Ireland is currently very, very aligned. This is our 40 by 30 report we done with Renewable Energy Ireland a couple of years ago. The figure is a little bit, it's about 5 years old at this stage, but it hasn't changed much. We are heavily dependent on kerosene and gas for our heating needs. And that is something, there are two markets we really need to look at how we address them. And bioenergy is a big place in that. District heating will be a big place, and also obviously retrofits, but that's not delivering what was expected at the start. What's important in that report, and it's worth reading if you get a chance, it's on our website, is it gives a very good breakdown of the heat profile, and that's a critically important thing. I'm not sure if I have a pointer on this, but can you see a cursor there? No. But in this graph here, you can see the breakdown of the heat demand based on temperature. And that's a critical thing, because when you look at the high-grade heats going above 100 degrees in particular, so you're looking at the top green bar and purple bar on top, or the maroon, those two are above 100 degrees. Bioenergy is probably the only thing that can really efficiently to provide heat at that level. We can obviously do between 60 and 100 and lower inefficiently, but really and truly we're in our own space there, and there are areas in industry that really and truly do not have a lot of options for decarbonising, but it comes very much from biomass systems. SCI's own study backs up this in terms of the demand there. They see a demand somewhere between 5 and 16%, or 7 and 17, depending on which part of the report you read, of the entire heat demand for the country can be met by biomass and biomethane. So the sector is well recognised for what it can do. Currently, if we look at the opportunities in Ireland, what's our limitations on the industry, or what can we actually achieve? Well, first of all, and a critical question we often get is feedstock. So we commissioned and wrote this report about 2 years ago. We published it, which is a capacity statement in the Irish sector to see how much we can actually achieve. And what we looked at in this was the resources. How much biomass is out there? What's the supply chain at the moment? You know, how mobile is it, or how much mobilized is it? What's the heating technology availability? In terms of what contractual arrangements are available to would-be heat procurers, in terms of system design and install capacity in the country, training and skills capacity, and financial models, and a few case studies. And it was to see, well, exactly what can we actually achieve here? And I suppose the critical graph coming out of that, and it's largely based on the Coford reports in terms of feedstock availability, is in terms of the graph at the bottom line here. We can, I suppose, just to give you context, talk of picojoules, which is really the figure you should know is we need about 200, petajoules for the heating sector in Ireland. Currently, we produce enough biomass to provide 10, but we're exporting a lot of that. We're exporting nearly half of that in terms of our pulpwood and other materials. So we've a lot of capacity there that's already exported. Our fuel that we produce here is not being used here. So we have a huge amount there that's already resources available to us. That can grow up to around the 20 mark over the next number of years, depending on demand. But there is a resource there. We have ample amount there to meet a growing demand over the next number of years, and we will be able to achieve a large portion of our targets, again 15% at least, based on bioenergy. In terms of mobilisation of the fuel sector, we have a network within our own organisation through the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme of 125 certified suppliers of wood fuel in Ireland. 30 of those are supplying wood chip. You'll find that map online. You can see the green drops are all the wood chip suppliers, blue are our firewood, briquettes are in red, and then wood pellets are in orange. So and that's generally the manufacturing sites. So we've a large network of those around the country that are supplying material. We have a very robust and well set up system in terms of fuel supply across the country. One of the questions we get a lot, and it's a relevant question, a very correct question, is the sustainability criteria around biomass. How are we sure, and how has it been managed to ensure that it's done correctly? So through the WFQA and also now through SURE, we have addressed that. I suppose the critical piece of legislation is the RED III Directive, or the Renewable Energy Directive Part 3, which was come out there in the last 2 years. And that sets the agenda. It is a very comprehensive document that looks at all of the different criteria that you must have to ensure that your biomass fuel or your gas fuel or whatever renewable fuel you have is actually renewable. And it looks at land use criteria, that it's legally harvested. It looks at the sustainability of the forest, that it's properly managed, that you're protecting the biodiversity within the area. So you're looking at forest regeneration, you're looking at the soil quality, maintaining biodiversity, protecting of sensitive waterways and ecosystems. And all of that, a lot of that goes on through our felling licensing system. And critically, that our greenhouse gas criteria, that we're getting the critical reduction in greenhouse gases. And generally, under RED III, you must see an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases, but we're seeing most Irish material is achieving at least 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by using biomass. So, what we have done over the last 18 months is we've joined up with a European recognised body called SURE, which certify to the RED III requirements. So we can guarantee that guarantees that the material itself meets the full requirements of RED III. It's quite a stringent process. We've seen a number of our members go through it over the last 18 months. There are some more in the pipeline, but we're delighted to partner with SURE to be able to offer that service in Ireland. And anyone that is interested in that, both for suppliers and both for potential end users or current end users, that certification sets some very clear criteria and some very clear measures that you can work by. Another piece of work we've been working on is specified biomass harvesting, and that's about maximising the value of what we get out of the forest. When we go in and cut forestry, we generally see 60% of the tree is good lumber, 40% is not and is usable for the energy sector. Some of it will go for panel boarding, but largely a lot of it is through demand, goes for energy. Specified biomass harvesting is harvesting a portion of that crop, which is usually side branches and tops. A lot of it has been left on site over the years, but that causes difficulties in management and other areas. So by utilising that as a fuel, in particular for large industrial boilers, we're providing a large volume of relatively cheap and largely available material. So we've set out criteria with that, the SBH document to ensure that's harvested correctly, and we're looking for its full recognition with the Department of Agriculture in terms of the standards for felling, for National Forest Standard and for good forest practice, so that it's fully recognised through all certification schemes. The heating sector itself, we have three main critical areas for this, with the domestic, the commercial and the industrial. Domestic is obviously open to everybody. I mean, it's your fireplace, well sorry, your wood stove should I say, your pellet stove or firewood stove. Or a gasification boiler. We see a lot of those going out around the country at this stage, pellet boilers. So you can run your central heating system or room heaters on wood fuels. The commercial sector, we're seeing a lot more in agricultural, in service sectors such as hotels. So with the SSRH has given a lot of support in that area. And we're seeing the industrial level as well. So this is the pharmaceutical, food processing and other sectors where large quantities of heat are required. In terms of the industrial and commercial, we really are targeting, and the areas where this really suits is dairy processing, pharmaceutical, hotel and leisure, come down the scale. There's a schools programme, healthcare, and then intensive agriculture. There are a number of good examples around the country already developed. We've listed them there, I won't read them all out, but they have been operating for some of them well over a decade. We was showing photos of a boiler there the other day built here in Ireland, built here and put in Ireland from the 1980s, still in operation. So from CASA, who have a stand here. So these systems have got a long-standing reputation for continuing to be there. The opportunities really there are the industrial decarbonisation roadmap is what we are all working towards. How do we decarbonise our industry? And also, as Timmy Dooley spoke about earlier, now we're from an EU level, we have to start looking at energy security and what resources do we have to ensure that we've got we've got the resources. We're not held up by geopolitical issues around the world. So it's something becoming more and more important. There is a biomass programme for schools. They've just announced, put out a tender there recently, and I understand the first part of that has gone out to a supplier. So we should see that programme, I think, rolled out over the summer for the first example schools in Wexford. District heating is a huge opportunity here in Ireland. We have a lot of urban centres where district heating fits in quite readily. We're not seeing the retrofit programme hitting the numbers it needs to hit. If we want to decarbonise a house and we find that we've got whole streets on kerosene or on which we see in lots of towns, or on gas, looking at district heating in those areas, especially where you have large anchor tenants in that town itself, can really help to decarbonise. District heating is an excellent way of basically taking the emissions off site and taking the heat supply off site, but you've got all those options then to utilise, be it bioenergy, be it certain stages excess electricity or whatever source you have coming off excess heat off industry, and it has a lot to play there. The SRH, there is an announcement required on updates. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and it's very welcome to see the updates coming on that programme, and we do expect that will have a good positive impact on it. I suppose the ongoing considerations is we do need to address, for some reason here in Ireland in particular, there's perceptions around biomass use in terms of that there's a difficulty in fuel supply. We've critically looked at that through our programme itself in our study, that there's ample supply of material. There is ample technology readiness here. A number of suppliers are here in their trade stands. Air quality impact is a question that always comes up, but that is an issue that's largely been engineered out and can be fully engineered out. This is off-the-shelf technology at this stage in terms of you need to be able to, it's usually particulate matter is the problem, and with the correct technology, that has been readily tackled. And then we have to look at this whole sustainability certification, ETS, just to make sure everybody is happy with that side of it. So look, it's something that We do need to look as well on the SRH to extend that to the ETS sector. There is a cap on the scheme. We would look for that to be lifted to update the tariff rates. There's a lot of talk of them being front-loaded to assist financial buy-in from various sectors. And the other thing is that there's a lot of older biomass systems, 20 years plus, that are coming to the end of their life cycle. And a lot of them are being forced to consider going back into fossil fuel because there's no support for them to continue with biomass. And we need to consider, is there something we can do for that sector? Because there have been people that have been using biomass for 2 decades plus and have supported the industry, are very good people to advertise the value of bioenergy at large, and we should be finding a way to make sure that we maintain them within the sector. Look, the domestic system, you've a lot of familiarity with those, so I won't dwell too much on that. But ultimately, we've quite a robust system around Ireland for dealing with, for supplying domestic fuels. The big thing we're finding on the domestic side now is, and again going back to emissions and efficiency, is eco-design on the stoves and on the appliances to make sure that they burn efficiently, to make sure you get the maximum value out of the fuel and you have the minimal amount of emissions in terms of particulates. So we have, again, a widely deployed sector in that area. There is a lot of, I suppose, the considerations we're looking at there is the air quality has been largely addressed with the solid fuel regulations, with the eco-design standards, and regular maintenance is an important point. The last thing we are looking though for on the domestic side is, and I won't call it commercial, but the public sector is, and the various non-profit sectors, is the VAT rate currently on biomass systems in Ireland is higher than that for heat pumps or solar. So we are looking for equalisation on those to make it, to assist the viability of it. It's obviously where it's recognised as a renewable source of heat. So that's the large part of it. Obviously biomass is a large part to play in terms of various sectors. We've seen numerous plants around the country for renewable electricity. So I'll leave it at that. Look, if there's any questions, I know we're going to a Q&A session and we're around for the day to discuss anything you may have. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Noel, and thanks, Alina, for your presentations. Just, before we go to the coffee break, there are just maybe a minute or two to ask if anyone has any questions for either of our presenters. There's one at the back here. If you could just state your name and your organisation, that'd be very good.
Good morning. Thanks for the presentations. My name is Carl Dalton from the HSE, the Sustainable Infrastructure Office. I'm not directly involved in energy. I'm involved in other aspects of the sustainable remit. But a general question, where do you see the market, it's a technical question, where do you see the market supply in Ireland for heat in either large acute facilities and then split it for smaller, like community nursing units? In particular, if you think about a healthcare facility, especially acute settings, you cannot lose supply. You've got critical facilities, critical services taking place. Are we in a safe zone to move into those areas, or have we moved into those areas either here or in Europe?
Okay, thanks, Carol. We'll take, if there are any other questions, so we'll take them together. Anyone else have a question? There's one here at the back. Stephen? That one, last one will be for Noel. Yeah.
Thank you. This is to Alina. Apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly. But we have a big question with a number of large energy consumers, and it's regarding how to measure the impact of the biogenic emissions through the whole life cycle. And I'd just love to understand from your perspective how that's being dealt with within your organisation.
Thanks very much for that question, and we will cover that in one of our panels, in the next panel actually as well, so but we'll ask Alina to comment on it. So we just leave it at that, those two questions for now. So Noel, do you want to take the first one? And then Alina take the second one.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I suppose the critical question there was maintaining the service, maintaining the heat supply. and where it fits in with healthcare facilities. You broke it down into two sectors. One is the larger units, and then the other is the nursing home type sector. So we'll look at both individually. In terms of, at this stage, the technology is very, very well set up. I mean, this is going on the Europeans have been very good at setting up systems like this for decades. The technology is well developed. We have good installers here in Ireland, and maintenance is a critical issue. These systems at this stage have full reliability. We can go to lots of towns across Europe and see these systems working and being relied on 100%. Usually what you'll find in some situations is that they'll have a peak loading plant which may be still using the existing fuel, depending on the setup. But because biomass, you tend to need a service system, often do a dual system, so you have two boilers in, a service on standby, or they'll both kick in times of very serious need, but you always have a backup there on that. It's often done in systems, or they might have a gas backup just for maintenance purposes and that, but there is ways of engineering in on that. In the smaller scale, again, the reliability at the stage is fairly much standard, that these systems are running for decades without any major issue. I obviously appreciate that this is a huge concern in the healthcare sector, but we've seen many facilities across Europe without any issue at all, or generally this is not an issue. I suppose we're also seeing district heating kicking in where it'll suit for hospitals in particular. And I suppose generally, when you look at it, we've a bigger decarbonisation question as well. Hospitals are usually built with a particular purpose, and retrofitting them with insulation is not an easy task, an expensive task, and especially the older ones, where depending on the facility itself. But usually you're looking at trying to decarbonise the heat source, so biomass fits in there at a low cost option very well. Usually far more so for those buildings that are difficult to retrofit.
Okay, thanks, Noel. Alina, do you want to take the second question, just if you have any high-level points? We will probably cover it later on in the panel discussion.
I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but I mean, I will be here all day, so we can also have a bilateral conversation later. But in terms of like a Bioenergy Europe, we merely represent the interest of the sector with the association. So regarding shore or any kind of certification scheme, we do not actually do any kind of calculation on emissions. So we are the umbrella association that gathers all the different actors at the EU level, and we try to insert ourselves into the legislative process to better represent the sector, which is not very fairly represented most of the times. So I don't know if I got that question correctly, but we will have the chance to talk later.
Do you want to come in, Noel, on that? So just in terms of how the kind of accounting of the emissions and how that can be offset using biomass in the trading system?
Yeah, so I mean, we're commissioning a report on this at the moment to look at. It's generally been accepted as to how bioenergy is handled, but sometimes it needs a full detailed explanation at various levels. RED 3 has it largely explained for Europe, but I suppose just to break it down in a nutshell, we generally, obviously trees, when they're first of all, they're not cut down, they're planted first before they're cut down. They're usually planted as part of a long-term program of forestry. We need to provide lumber materials. When you harvest timber, my understanding, and it's been explained to me by people who've been involved in negotiations at COP level, is that obviously at planting it will slowly absorb carbon until it gets to canopy closure. Then you have a lot more carbon being absorbed over the 40 years. All trees will eventually die and release the carbon as they deteriorate. When you harvest, you have a certain amount of that carbon that's going into building structures that's locked up for good. Sorry, not for good, but generally that's seen as maybe a 100-year cycle. So there's a ways of account. This is all agreed in determining how you be fully measured on it. What's generally happens though is there's the 40% that's not going into lumber. That's considered as an immediate release to atmosphere. So because of that, any of that material you then use as a fuel is considered carbon neutral. Because if it's not used as a fuel, and I suppose the brash is a very good example, if you leave the brash there to rot down in the forest, as has been happening, within a year all that carbon has been released. Whereas instead what you're doing is you're taking it out, using the energy out of it, the carbon has been released at that point. So you're still going back into the carbon cycle. And I suppose the critical thing is it's all still involved in the carbon cycle. We're not taking fossilized carbon out of a fossil fuel and releasing that into the system. This is all in the full cycle and is continually being replaced. And the critical thing on that is when you are going harvesting a forestry for lumber and you're getting the byproduct for energy, that forestry must be maintained. If you're taking out forestry and not replacing it, that is not considered renewable, and that will not be certified, that will not be usable material. So it's very critical that you're maintaining a forestry system to maintain the overall balance.